Badass Softie is this idea of balancing this tension of being driven, but also leading with your heart. What are some tensions that you think they are going to have to step into in this space?
Well, JJ, I love that you asked that question because I've come up with what I believe are the four unavoidable tensions if you're going to show up as a thriving badass Softie.
I love this. I'm so happy right now. Welcome to Badass Softie, a podcast for leaders who are unapologetically ambitious and want to lead with heart, because you're allowed to chase big goals without losing what makes you human. I'm your host, Dr. JJ Peterson, and today we are talking to my good friend, Tim Arnold. If you have ever felt the tension between striving for excellence while also having a lot of grace for yourself and for others, this conversation is for you. And I want to get right into it because I talk a lot about how Tim's influenced me and how this works. But if you're looking to really be an incredible leader that leads in a new way, this conversation is for you. So I'm just going to get right to it. You are going to get a ton of value out of my conversation with Tim Arnold. Everybody listening, Tim is one of my just genuinely favorite people in the world. And I can say in the world because he's from Canada. And so it's not just in the US, it's literally in the world. And we met, now probably about 8 years ago. And Tim was hosting a conference up in Canada. And Donald Miller met him and just came back from that conference going, you have to talk to this guy. He's unbelievable when it comes to leading crowds and getting people excited about stuff. And he has just a presence on stage that captivates an audience. And I was like, okay, I'll believe it when I see it. And so I called, and immediately I think we then talked on the phone for like maybe 2 hours, because it was like, oh, you this? Oh, me this? Oh my gosh. And so Tim started coming down and working with StoryBrand and being one of our workshop facilitators and hosts at our live workshops. And he just made us better at every single turn. And I can easily say that Tim is a leadership expert on an international level. He is a keynote speaker. He is a best-selling author. He helps companies lead in a whole new way.
Oh, gosh, I don't even know what to say except thank you. And gosh, we have had some amazing adventures working together, and to be able to be part of this new chapter. And as soon as I heard Badass Softie, I was like, oh, I've got to be on that podcast, because this is a conversation that I have been waiting to have. So thank you for the invite. And I need to also qualify, I'm dealing with a minor plumbing issue in my office right now. So every now and then, if you hear just a little jackhammering in the background, don't be concerned. We may do a little pause, but we'll get through it for sure.
And really what we're going to do with this is kind of hold this intention with trying to be professional on a podcast while also being human and having noise in the background. And I said it that way specifically because that is the work that you do with people. When we say that you teach people and teach leaders how to lead with and hold tension, what does that mean? Tell me, just kind of like, if you were going to give a cocktail party answer to what is lead with and all about, what does that look like for you?
I'll start with what it doesn't look like. We're living, at least north of the border here in Canada, we're living in an increasingly either or world. We're living in a culture, both in the boardroom and in the dining room table, that's more polarized, more divided. People are more having a tendency to be on their side. And our relationships, our conversations often are full of the word but, or, if you're a polite Canadian, however. And yet, what I've found is, especially in leadership, you may not even call yourself a leader, but a person who's trying to make a difference, a person who's trying to move things forward, who's trying to tackle maybe some of the issues that other people want to avoid. Most of these situations require us to go from this overly simplistic either or right, wrong approach to recognize that there's a lot of and here. It's not this or that. It's this and that. Now, I want to be clear. There are elements of life and leadership that require either or thinking. There are things that are right and wrong. There are formulas and policies and procedures where there's one way. And yet, JJ, you know, the more responsibility that's put on your shoulders, the less you're dealing with those things. All of a sudden, you're the person who's asking questions like, gosh, I've got to focus on profit and I've got to focus on quality. You know, now I've got to really invest in the team and relationships, but we got to get stuff done and be task focused. You know, my job now is embracing change and innovation, and yet we've got these values and mission on the wall that we can't lose. So how do we embrace change and hold on to stability? And the reality of leadership is the more you step into leading, whether you're leading people or just moving things forward as a personal leader, the more you have to move from an either or perspective to an and perspective. It's not this or that, it's this and that. And it's not just work. I mean, work's a great example. If I'm going to show up well, it means I've got to manage work and home. You know, every week there's a new book that comes out on how to solve that problem. Don't buy them. Because if there was a magical formula to how to solve work home, none of us would struggle. Activity and rest. You know, I'm only going to be thriving in life if I embrace activity and embrace rest and recovery. And what I've found in my own life, and certainly in the leaders I work with, is the more people can identify a few of these, I call them not problems to solve, but tensions to manage. The more they can identify a few of these tensions, and rather than ignore them or avoid them, because a lot of times that's what we do. We think, ooh, this is complex. This is hard. There's no easy answer. So I look the other way. But instead, lean into it. Say, you know what? This isn't going away. It's not solvable, but I'm going to learn to manage this really well. That's when good stuff happens. That's when we feel like we're not stuck, that we're moving forward. And I think that's how we show up well.
And for me, when you actually came and even worked with our team, you did a workshop with us. And when you talked about the idea of managing the tension versus solving, that was huge for me. Because I think we want to find a quick answer of just like, well, it is this or that, or this is the quick way. Like we almost make a rule about it, like quality over profit or profit over quality. You know, you want to make a rule. But when you actually recognize that both of those have to be held together and that there is tension, the biggest piece is just almost acknowledging that there's tension there. If you can name that in your own life and in the life of your company and the team that you're leading, I think that lets everybody's shoulders drop a little bit and go, okay, so I'm not the only one feeling weird about this right now, right? Like everybody recognizes there's a weirdness happening when these two things come up, and sometimes we choose this and sometimes we choose this. And it's not about solving it, but actually living in that tension. That is the struggle, I think, for most people.
Yeah. And we want to have the right answer. So we look for these, again, overly simplistic answers. But I say to any leader or group I work with, anytime you have a chronic issue, something where, you know, you're in a meeting and someone surfaces a concern or a question, and in the back of your mind, you're thinking, are we still talking about this? It's probably not a problem to solve. There's probably a tension there that's not going away. And again, there may not be a solution, but that's not an excuse for letting it go. You want to learn to manage it well. And this is true at home and at work. You know, I have 2 kids, and I did my best to read every parenting book that was passed my way, and everyone has its, you know, magical formula. And I remember Becky and I talking when our kids were young. Ooh, some of them are all about structure and consistency and consequence, but some of them are all about flexibility and attachment parenting and DNA coding, that you've got to flex your approach around like, gosh, what's the right answer? Well, you know, it didn't take us long to recognize the moments that we're at our best as parents, we're not flexible or structured, we're flexible and structured. And what works right now may not work a week from now. And what works with my son doesn't work the same way with my daughter. It's not a problem to solve, but I do know this: we can learn to manage it well. And the same phenomenon's true at work. I remember many years ago, I was leading a homeless shelter, a 40-bed homeless shelter. And, you know, we had these beautiful values on the wall, values like fairness, for example, and everyone agreed with them. But the argument that I found myself dealing with constantly was I'd have my managers who led the shelter. They'd say, well, fairness is consistency. There's no favoritism. There's house rules. There's constant. That's what fairness is. Well, then you talk to a coach who work with all of our homeless friends one-on-one. They say, no. Fairness is individuality. You know, what we would ask of this person, we'd never ask of this person based on their experience of trauma or their mental health issues. Fairness isn't that everyone gets the same thing. It's that people get what they need. And we just had this ongoing argument until we recognized, I think it's both. And you know what? If we're not able to navigate this tension, not between individuality or consistency, but learn to marry individuality and consistency, those aspirational values that we put on our wall, they don't mean much at all. This is what it comes down to. And what I would say, JJ, is just naming it, just saying, hey, this isn't going away. Let's lean into it. It's game changing.
Oh, it's huge. Like I said, I think for me, that was the biggest thing is like you kind of tiptoe around it and then you go, let's just name it. Well, so I already can hear people like, I guess not here, but I imagine people listening to this who are kind of in this space of the badass softie world. They can quickly see, oh yeah, that makes sense based on why Tim's here, right? like the badass softie is this idea of balancing this tension, of managing the tension of being driven, but also leading with your heart. And so you've named a couple tensions already, kind of dropped those as we've been going along. But I know you have a set of them that you really walk through in your books and in your trainings. But for those who are listening right now, who are kind of in this space that they want to be driven, but also want to lead with heart and keep those two in working together, marrying them, what are some tensions that you think they are going to have to step into in this space?
Well, JJ, I love that you asked that question because I've written 4 books now around this concept. And one is tensions that it applies to teamwork. And one are the tensions that are applied to leading change. Some are just leadership in general. But after you reached out to me and I started to get my head around this badass softie way of thinking and living, I've come up with what I believe are the 4 unavoidable tensions if you're going to show up as a thriving badass softie.
I love this. I'm so happy right now.
I think one tension that you want to just be mindful of and lean right into is that you want to be an individual. I'm going to use the word leader, whether you call yourself that or not. You want to be someone who has high expectations and high levels of grace. And what's interesting about attention, it's like breathing. Inhaling and exhaling only work when they work together. Inhaling's great until all I do is inhale. Then I'm blue in the face. Same with any tension. Expectations are great. I want to have expectations on myself, on my team, if you're part of a team, on the people I serve. And yet if all my life and leadership is around expectations, I will live with resentment. You know, people give up because they think, why bother? The bar is just too high and the carrot's always moving. So grace is all about understanding and empathy and factoring in real life. And, you know, if all I do is live a grace-based approach, I actually am not pushing myself and others to their full potential. You know, sometimes a leader's role is to see in others what they don't see in themselves and say, no, you've got this. So rather than settle for this wrestling match between should I be a leader that has high expectations and set the bar higher, should I just lead with grace and understanding, answer that question with yes. The best badass softie out there doesn't meet in the middle. They've got high levels of expectations and grace.
I love that so much because I think that is a tension that I hold in of myself and even, you know, in my kids, right? Like, you know, it's like, and work. So if we're talking like work, obviously I can see that with my team. It's like, because if you just drive all the time, you are going to burn people out and you're going to frustrate them because you're always moving that mark. But if you always just only have grace in every situation, it's not good for your company, but also like even the other members of your team who have held themselves 100%. To a higher standard and they're consistently watching somebody on the team kind of pull down and you going, oh, that's okay. But being able to walk both those things, like you talked about a minute ago, the individuality, looking at people as individuals and understanding where they're at and what's going on. I mean, we all have hard days. So instead of going, I'm always going to hold this person to this standard, go, I know what this person's going through. And right now they need a little bit more grace in this space. You're already making me almost about cry with just the first one. So let's keep going.
Well, your comment actually just made me want to add one more piece to it. Again, this either or culture we live in also wants the magical formula. Okay, expectation is grace. Well, just give me the proportions. It depends. And I know that's not a comfortable couple words to hear, but how I manage that right now in my life and with my team will look different next week. It's not about sides and proportions. It's just making sure I'm getting the value of both. Yes. And I know what it looks like when I've over-focused on one side to the neglect of the other. So rather than looking for this utopian balance, get comfortable with the term dynamic balance. Expectations grace is a dance that I'm just constantly working at. I'm not avoiding it. I'm not ignoring it. I'm leaning into it and I'm managing it really well. And there's a first cousin of expectations grace that I think for your audience of badass softies would be worth noting. I don't have the best language because I'm currently researching and writing about this, but the language I have right now is striving and accepting. Striving and accepting. And I find some folks lean towards striving. I want to read the next self-help book. I want to go to the next conference. I want to ever better, and I lean there. I have a worksheet I do every morning on my day and my vision. Like I do striving well, and yet striving without accepting does not equal a happy life. And accepting doesn't mean being complacent. It just means I'm enough. And if I don't do any of these things, I'll always be enough. And accepting also recognizes that I'm not going to be good at everything. And that's okay. Accepting sometimes is life's exhale. And I find that, again, if it's all accepting and no striving, we don't actually live out the full potential of our life. But striving and accepting, I believe, they only work when they're working together. And, I found even in my life, in striving and accepting, I lean towards striving. So I need really healthy, accepting, biased people around me, sometimes to kick me in my badass, to say, enough, put the book away, take the goals off the spreadsheet, like you're good. And sometimes, I'm the person who's saying, hey, I'm all about accepting. And what about this?
What I'm hearing is as you're talking about that is it's not about compromise or settling. Like, I don't think when you think of accepting, it's not to me about like compromising your striving or just accepting like what is and not being willing to change. But there is a balance of where even, especially I think as a leader, you can drive so hard that you can drive your team insane and you can drive your team into burnout. And there's sometimes where you go, I think there's a reality check. So you might say, you actually have a skewed version of what reality is in this moment. I need you to pause and recognize all that has been achieved, all that we are achieving, all that is happening to move us forward. Here's the plans we have in place that means we're not settling. However, the striving has to pause for a second to let us breathe. And that's, to me, the acceptance part is just like, let's breathe in the reality and truth of the moment. And then, but also recognize we're still striving, right? Like that's, I think a lot of times for me is somebody, when I start to panic about I'm not striving enough or we're not doing enough to move things forward, when somebody comes to me and goes, hey, can we just list everything that's happening right now? Can we list everything that we've accomplished and we're fulfilling the plan that you put in place to move us forward? That to me is the accepting part of going, oh, I'm feeling like we're not enough in this moment, or I'm panicking. This is coming out of fear. My striving is coming out of fear. I need to actually accept that the work is happening and what the truth is of the moment. That to me would, as you were talking, that's kind of how it sat with me.
Years ago, I had a mentor that spent some time with me, and they said something to the effect of, Tim, you're really good at to-do lists. Now I want you to work on done lists. I want you to work on what have you done? And she pushed me on it to say, because I think both matter, but if you only ever always focus on the to-dos, you're actually not going to be a very happy or effective person. And it's been a good challenge to say, and we do that even in our team. We say, okay, we just had our quarterly retreat. We got a list, exciting, long list of to-dos. Now we're going to look at dones. What's our done list? And you leave there going, yeah, we have to accept that we're doing good work. And yeah, we're not there, but where we're at is great. So anyway, striving and accepting is the best language I have for it.
I love that we're working it out here. I love that we're working it out here.
You like that? Yeah. So you heard it here first, folks. The third tension that I think a true badass softie will embody, and this is one that in my second book, Lead with And, I interviewed leaders all over the world, and I started to track and chart the uniquenesses of the leaders that stood out from the crowd. And one tension that was top of the list, and it's funny because I didn't obviously think about it at the time, but I think every one of these leaders, I think you would qualify as a badass softie, in that they were incredibly confident and incredibly humble. They weren't a little bit of both. They weren't one or the other. They were both to the full extent. And confidence wasn't arrogance or cockiness, but they had the confidence to say, no, you can trust me, or you can trust this, or I've been through this before. You know, when we did StoryBrand work, it's that authority, right? That, hey, this is something that I want to help you. And to be a really good guide in life, you have to have confidence. And humility is interesting because I think a lot of times humility is, assuming you're wrong. It's not that at all. It's just assuming that there's always something to learn, that there's always a perspective you're missing. There's always a blind spot. And, you know, when I looked at and interviewed leaders, the ones that were top of the list in effectiveness weren't a little bit confident and a little bit humble. They were highly confident and highly humble. They were curious, you know, and I thought even about in my life, the people who've impacted me the strongest, coaches I've had, teachers I've had, they would qualify as they definitely were confident, but they were always looking to learn. They had that true humility. So I think, again, that's a tension that as you step into this role as a badass softie, it's like, I want to do this in a way that's fully confident and fully humble.
I have always said that true humility can only actually come with confidence in many ways. Is that there's a false humility that a lot of people, when you're, oh, I'm not that, you know, you kind of like brush off compliments and stuff like that, that really is like an arrogance to some degree when it's a false humility. It's not confidence, it's arrogance and insecurity when you can't actually be humble. But I also think that to truly be confident in yourself, you are humble, because when I don't have to prove anything to anybody else, then I can actually just step into my own expertise and my own leadership and learn from everybody else around me who is just as good in other areas. And I can be excited about that. So I love this tension of the idea. I think, truthfully, my favorite leaders in life are those who are incredibly confident and incredibly humble. And that is what I strive to be. I want to always be a learner, but I also want to lean into my gifting and expertise to help people move forward in the areas that I can help them. And you're right. It comes from kind of that story brand space, or the story space really, of being a guide, the person who helps other people win. And I think that the only way you can play that role is with those two things. So, okay, that 3 powerhouse tensions already. What is our final one?
Well, the last one, and you know what's interesting, is the last one is almost a tension around, as a leader, a badass softie who's making the world a better place. It's how I communicate, how I come across. And JJ, you were the person who came to mind for me, who I believe manages this tension incredibly well. In our work together, I feel like you haven't solved it, but you're very effective at what I call communicating both fully truthfully and fully tactfully. If those words don't work, it would be embracing candor and clarity, and at the same time, embracing diplomacy and relationship. And I think all too often, people think, well, leaders just have to be truthful and clear and get to the points and brutally honest. I say to anyone I'm coaching, being called brutally honest is not a compliment. That's not what you're striving for. And yet, I think sometimes, on the softy side, because we are empathetic people, because we're people who care about people's feelings and the impact we have on them, we lean into diplomacy and tactfulness and relationship, so much so that we lose the message that's important. And I think that the best badass softies out there will really learn to constantly integrate this truthful and tactful approach. When you have a difficult conversation to have, just to take that moment and say, how do I express this in a way that's true to what I believe, and think about the impact I'm having. Think about the timing, the location, who should be in the room. If you're someone who that part is always what you're thinking about, you're pushing yourself to say, how do I step up in my candor? How do I actually push myself to have a little bit more courage to speak my truth? And I think, the community of badass softies and world changers that you're speaking to, for us to really make the difference we're capable of making, we've got to constantly be working at communicating in both a fully truthful and a fully tactful way.
And another way I've heard you talk about it before is candor and kindness. And for those of us, who come from a faith background, there's a little bit of, for me, the 1 Corinthians love chapter in this, right? It's like you can have all the knowledge and all the wisdom in the world, and yet if there's not love that comes with it, it is just a bunch of noise. And so for somebody who wants to kind of lean into these tensions, what's something you can tell them of how to handle this well and how to learn how to dance with this instead of always struggling with it?
Just remind yourself over and over again that life is full of problems to solve and life is full of tensions to manage. And the more that you want to make a difference, the more you want to lead, whether you're leading people or moving things forward as a personal leader, the more you're wrestling with not either or situations, but both and. It's this and that. And name a few of those. We talked about a few of them today, but some of these tensions like work and home and activity and rest, they're not going away. And just allow yourself, I think it's Brene Brown that said, when she talks about dichotomy, she says, just stand back, take a deep breath and say, both of these things can be true. So just sometimes we have to recognize, especially when we're dealing with those chronic issues that feels like, I just want to solve this. Recognize that no, leadership isn't solving this. Leadership is having the courage to lean into it and to recognize that if I can manage this in a healthy way, we're going to make a difference. And I think leading to that, I would use the word courage, because when you're leaning into tension, it means that you're choosing a little bit of discomfort. I think one of the reasons that people are allowing themselves to live in a polarized world right now and just pick sides and be divisive is because it's comfortable. Well, we all agree and we're all right. Well, sure. But if you really want to rise above that noise and actually work on some higher level things, you've got to be okay with recognizing like, wow, JJ, you and I aren't seeing this the same way, and that's okay. This may not be a right and wrong. This is a right and right. And that may be a little bit uncomfortable. I love the quote by author Susan David. She says, discomfort is the price of admission to a meaningful life. And if you want to, as a badass softie, really tap into your full potential, have the most impact possible, it means that leaning into tension means you'll be uncomfortable a bit, and that's okay. It actually is a sign that you're probably doing the right things.
Oh, thank you. I knew it. I knew getting you on here would be magical, and it was. And so thank you for taking the time, even in the midst of everything you have going on. And Tim, if people are interested in learning more about you, I know, you have 4 books that people can get, and you're coming out with a new one, but where can people learn more from you or reach out if they're interested in bringing you in and having you talk to their team?
Yeah, you can learn all about me and the way I work with organizations through keynote speaking and workshops. And you can even get a pretty fun quiz that can assess your ability to distinguish between a problem to solve and attention to manage. Just go to my website, timarnold.ca. So not Tom Arnold, Tim Arnold, Tim, timarnold.ca. It's for Canada, it's CA, timarnold.ca. And you can find me there. If you go to Tim Arnold Leadership on LinkedIn, that's about the only social world that I hang out in regularly.
Love it. Well, this has been incredibly fun, and I look forward to you coming back to Nashville so we can hang out at a honky tonk soon.
I can't wait. We are going to shake our badass softies. It's going to be great. Ooh, I think we need to edit that out.
No, we're leaving it in. We are leaving it in. It's perfect.
That did not come across the way I intended it.
It was perfect. You made me cry twice now. Can you see why I had him on? I mean, come on. He truly is one of the best of us in so many ways. That man is incredible. And Tim, thank you. Thank you for leading the way you lead and teaching other people to lead in really a new way. And for me, the thing that came back to me, I've heard him talk about this many times and I've read his books. And the thing that came back to me in this moment was the idea of the dance. That when we encounter these things of trying to be confident while also trying to be humble, while trying to strive for greatness and drive, right? We talk about this on Badass Softie, being driven while also actually being fully ourselves and leading with our heart. In those moments, they're not things to be solved. They're not equations to be figured out. It's a dance. It's just a dance. And I actually have the privilege of living in this tension, even if the tension is uncomfortable. I have the privilege of being able to carry both of these things because I'll be honest, it is easier to go black and white. It is easier to go either or. It's so much harder to live in that tension. But if I stop looking at it as something difficult and more start looking at it like a dance, I think I can step into this in a whole new way and try to embrace both and lead in a new way, which is really what we're trying to do here. So that's what I'm taking away from this conversation, and that's what I want to call out for you. So let me leave you with this. May you find the courage to lean into the tensions instead of trying to solve them. May you learn how to dance with high expectations and high grace, with striving and accepting, with being confident and humble while speaking with candor and kindness. Because we believe you can be both ambitious and kind, fun and driven, powerful and deeply human. Your leadership can inspire, your success can have soul, and your ambition can make space for everyone. That's why you're a badass softie. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. Follow and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. BadassSoftie.com is crafted by Fruitful Design and Strategy.